back to the channel. The question comes up all the time. How many speeding tickets do you have? And when I respond that I don't have any tickets, that of course leads into how do you not have any tickets? Now, I've been reluctant to do a video like this because I will probably get a ticket during this video with my luck. But maybe I can share some things that will help all of you in your endeavors to have a good time, but yet not pay the price in the long run. First off, as most of you know that are close to me, I tend to drive very slow. But if I am going to do an occasional infraction of the law, I will look for places where it is very remote, where I possibly will not run into my friends of law enforcement. And also that way I'll minimize my risk of endangering others. Now all these, of course, don't fall victim to right place at right time, good luck, all those things. I really don't factor into what I'm thinking about it. The next thing that equates into my endeavors is radar, specifically radar detectors. For those of you that aren't familiar with exactly how radar works, well, you're not alone. I also don't know exactly how radar works. Maybe my friend Lawrence, who has a career in law enforcement, will chime in. I've used tons of different radar detectors. The current ones we're using, I think, are the Valentine 1, Escort Redline. I use Escort Max 360. That's just my best option, but you know, there's tons of information online. Choose whatever you want. Now, the most important thing, pretty much around here and most of the places I've traveled to, everyone has changed to Lidar. And for those of you that aren't familiar with Lidar, what it is, it's laser. And it's difficult to beat. So it shoots out of the gun, hits a reflective surface on the car, bounces back, and in that time, it's able to tell our friend your speed. The problem is it's very hard to beat. And radar detectors typically will always pick it up, but by the time it tells you, you're pretty much screwed. The only way against it is countermeasures. Now, in many states, countermeasures are not legal. So these systems fall in a gray area. They're actually used for parking assist. They just happen to also disrupt the LiDAR signal, which makes it where a person trying to tag you can't get a reading back. But we've had good luck with blinder systems, and I continue to use them. We used to use M47s, and then they came out with this new system called the HP 905 Compact. We use both systems in a lot of our cars, and we've had a lot of success, mostly Drew and my dad. Myself, it saved me a few times, but for them, it is a necessary tool. So what you get is you just open this box up. It's pretty straightforward. You get the control unit and you get the heads, which they used to be much larger and now they are smaller. I brought a sample here so you could see. Look at the size of that. And they're much easier to mount. They're so light that you can even mount them with double-sided tape versus the old ones that have to spend tons of time building custom brackets for every car, modifying the grills. And I'm sure all of you know how much fun that is and how time-consuming it is. So these systems are pretty good. They just kind of go on. And then for me, you can wire it so it goes inside the car, but typically I don't like to do any additional wiring than I have to. So what I did, so you can get an idea here, this is for the SV. What I did was I built this. So I was able to get this project box off of, I believe, Amazon. It's waterproof. Underneath this, the control unit is all the wiring. So what I've got is one of these. This is called a power node. It's made by a company called Cheetah. What it does is it just sits there, and then when your car starts charging and voltage climbs, it turns the system on, and it will actually shut off when voltage falls off, basically being regulated by your alternator. So I've got an onboard relay, the power node fires a relay, and the relay is also controlled by a remote. That way I can shut it off from inside the car. Now, the question being, most of the alert is done through the control unit, but how I get away from that is the radar detector, because it tells you when you're getting tagged by LiDAR. So I just use that in the vehicle. This way I don't have to run tons of wires through the firewall, but you want to do whatever works for you. So you can take a look here at how I set it up in that project box. You can see right here, there's a control unit. Underneath there is where I did all the wiring and where the relay lies. It can be mounted with double-sided tape or Velcro, and it's waterproof. Let's take a look now at how I mounted it in the SV. Okay, so I installed the blinder inside the SV. Go ahead and take a look here real quick at how I did it. You can see the wiring coming back along the frame there, over to the blinder control unit in the project box. Then of course you have the same mirror on the passenger side. The important thing about this is that we need to test it, because the bottom line is there's nothing worse than putting all this back together and then realizing it doesn't work. So we'll go ahead and fire it up and give it a shot. Well, that's good news for me. You can see that the blinder fired up and all is good. But ultimately, it all resides around the test, the true test. Again, of course, my assistant Drew is here. Now, what Drew is holding is actually a laser simulator. We install quite a few of these, so it's definitely worth our while to make sure they're working and keep them working. All right, my dear, go ahead, please. There you can see the LEDs are tripping. The blinder would be indicating that the SV is getting hit with Lidar. And of course, we definitely want to check the other side. And again, it looks like everything is good. Finished result of the heads mounted in the front of the SV. Now, let's take a look at a couple other projects I've done. And the reason why is it may help you in your projects, even if you aren't specifically working on, let's say, an SV F430 or 996 Turbo. There are certain things that pop up. I had a lot of questions when I did it the first time, and maybe these will help you. So starting off on the F430, what I did on the F430 is I mounted 3 heads in front, and I used the M47 model. Now, do you need 3? Through my testing, 2 is sufficient, but I didn't know when I started, so I added 3. You can take a quick look here at how I did it. I put 1 on the front center splitter, and then I mounted 1 behind each grille. Why it's important to note that those are actually mounted behind the grills in the ducts is 2 things. One is that I like how they're super stealthy, but I was a little worried because they're actually behind the grill. So Blinder's official response to me was, do not mount them behind the grills. But on the other side, they said they have tested and they do know it works. As such, I have tested and I did find it works. So something to consider. Now, would it work better if I would have flushed it out through the grill? Maybe, probably, but it does work the way it is. Just something to consider if you're going to install. As far as a control unit in the F430, I opted to go back to the engine compartment because obviously the battery is in passenger footwell. All of you know that. That would kind of defeat the purpose of having it wireless. So I went back here, nice spot below this carbon panel where you can actually mount the waterproof project box with the control unit. The only thing I will mention is that it does get quite toasty, as within any Ferrari engine compartment. Therefore, I isolated everything with heat wrap and also the wiring in any of the sensitive areas. I would recommend you do the same. On a lot of the initial cars that I worked on, I used 2 heads, but what I found out from testing was 1 was sufficient. So then I came to the conclusion, why use 2 when 1 is just as good? At least in my testing. So back here you can take a look at what I did. The rear was much easier than the front. You can see that I put the head right below the license plate. All I had to do was notch the license plate and license plate frame. Then down below I used high compression foam along with double-sided tape. That gave me the compression fit that I needed to hold everything in place. And then back there in the grill of the diffuser, the wiring was able to go straight through. So it made everything pretty straightforward. And that completed the job on this car. Everything went pretty smooth. Let's take a look at what I did over there in the 996 Turbo. The 996 Turbo was a little bit different in that there were no real side grills to work on. And also, when given the opportunity, it's best to kind of keep them more towards the center of the car, because what I've been told is my friends in law enforcement are trained to shoot the Lidar gun at where your plate should be, if you have one, or even if you don't have one. The center duct was the best option for me. The issue is, though, is it's still not that much easier. It does make it easier that you don't have the grills to deal with. However, the problem being you still have to pull the front nose because you want to be able to get hardware to the back side of the mounting brackets for the heads. At least I do. If you want to take the chance, you could, but it is just plastic. Therefore, I use all stainless hardware, and then fender washers with nylocks on the back side. I would be cautious of using any sort of self-tapping type screw that they might not hold, especially at the speeds that I'm sure most of you drive. But let's take a look at how I did it. Since the battery's in the front of the 996 Turbo, it had an optimal place. On the right side of the battery, there's a slot where the waterproof project box fits perfectly. Where I mounted it also allows me to easily assess the control module for updates. The rear of the 996 Turbo is great because behind the license plate, there is a hole that allows you to run wires, which of course makes it just much faster. Anytime there's a combination on the car that makes my job easier, I'm always happy about that. So take a look right here. Look familiar because it's a similar strategy. Single head. And what I did was I ran the wire, of course, through that hole in the rear bumper, and there is double-sided tape holding the head up. Then down below, I went ahead and notched the license plate and license plate frame to accommodate the head. The wireless kits for the M47 were made by a company called Cheetah. Unfortunately, I don't think they make them anymore, but all of you being very resourceful, I'm sure you can find them on eBay or Craigslist, but they do work quite well. But then again, after you saw the way I did it on the SV, there is always that possibility where you wouldn't need to use a remote inside the vehicle, and you could just rely on your radar detector. I've set up just a quick demonstration for all of you to kind of check out how it goes. You'll see right there in the center console is where the remote receiver is for the blinder. Now, how do I know that the radar detector works? Well, that's because every time I get tagged, both of them go crazy. But let's go ahead and take a quick look at it. So you can see the receiver right there, and on the left is the indicator that it actually has reception to the transmitter, and in the center, you've got your power. Now, we'll go ahead and simulate a laser hit and see how it works. Now, you can see the receiver going crazy because it is a simulated laser hit, and that is actually very annoying. And in the cab of any of these cars being quite small, it is very loud, which makes it even better. It's kind of like a decision of the lesser of two evils, either getting hit by that sound, or I don't know, the drill at the dentist. I don't know, for me, maybe I take the drill. I've got the Murci behind me and I've set up a presentation so you can see exactly how the park distance control works. Unfortunately, Drew and Natalia are unavailable to assist me. Therefore, I will look and see if I can find a volunteer. Lucky for me, going around the shop, I was able to find one of Natalia's toys that has volunteered to give me a hand. You're all excited to volunteer and help me, aren't you, R2? That seemed like a solid yes to me. You can see that I put the switch for the blinder right here on the park and brake handle. That way I can assess it easily to either change to park distance control or countermeasures. And occasionally, it just so happens that I might forget to switch it back, which would allow me to have countermeasures even though I'm not really supposed to. Okay, let's fire it up and see if she automatically turns on.
HP905 parking assist activated.
Well, there you go. R2 is quite the assistant and show off at that, but does a great job at showing all of you how park distance control works. Now, of course, I primarily leave it in that, but occasionally, because I'm getting older and possibly have a lapse of memory, I might leave it in defense mode, which gives me countermeasures against Lidar. I don't intend it to be that way, but you never know, it could happen. Could it happen to any of you? I don't know. But in any case, at least you have a good idea of how it works and what saved me all these years. As I touched on before, one of the nicest things about the blinder control unit is you can update it through your computer. Therefore, you would have all the current information and countermeasures on all the new Lidar guns. Also, I believe you can change the voice and not have the very monotone middle-aged man that I have. However, for myself, I'm holding out to wait to see if they have the Kate Beckinsale option. This will definitely help me to avoid those costly tickets from my friends in law enforcement. So other than that, I hope all of you have a good weekend. See you next time. As I touched on before, what did I touch on before? What's the deal with this thing?
Did you check the battery?
No.